everybody. Welcome to Wall Street Hackers, one of the top-rated shows on the Pod TV network. I'll be your moderator, Nick Palavita, and of course on the Wall Street Hackers, we look at some interesting stories that just don't get anywhere else when it comes to investing. We have the stories of the week, we have quotes of the week, and of course, Peter's pick of what stocks you should be looking at to improve your portfolio. So with that, we're going to bring in the hacker himself, who received his bachelor's degree in economics from UCLA. He also received a law degree from the University of Miami and a MBA from NYU, spending 17 years on the street, working in New York City area, none other than Peter Bennett. Peter, welcome to your show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wall Street Hackers 2024. It's another year and seems in some ways like another weird year for the world anyway. So we always start with the markets, and it seems as if the markets are also a little weird. They're as delusional as ever, as I've been saying for years. On one side, people are pointing to the market hit near record high, actually a new high in December. And the market is delusional because it's picking up on Fed chairman's comments in December, and they were perceived as dovish. I underline perceived. But the market is still pricing in 6 rate decreases, each of 25 basis points for 2024. And I'd be shocked if that happened. So let's look at all the evidence why the market is delusional, as it has been for years, even though it's up. I mean, the first point I would make is, okay, great. Everybody in the financial press is emphasizing that the market's, hitting new highs, and it's been a great 6 months. But actually, if you look at the market since December 21, the market has gone nowhere. It's microscopically higher than it was. So basically, you've gotten zero return over 2 years on your money. And that's in nominal dollars. If you look at real dollars in terms of the effect of inflation, you've lost whatever the inflation rate was. And that was pretty high for the last 2 years. So let's say whatever, at average, 5%, whatever. So you've lost maybe 10% of your money, having your money in the market. So it's not necessarily all roses there. But also, let's look at some more evidence of why the market is delusional. Number 2 is, I think the market misunderstood Chairman Powell's speech. He was always saying he's data dependent and they're not sure. And they should be unsure. I guess this was a different point. But the point is, everybody's like, what is the Fed going to do? What is the Fed planning? But the Fed has been wrong for a good part of the last 2 years. They were behind the inflation curve. So who's to say that they aren't, again, misestimating what inflation is going to bring? And Wall Street Hackers says that they are, and I'm going to give you some fundamental evidence in a little while. But even after his perceived dovish comments, number one, the several FOMC members walked it back, and even he walked it back. So this is from an article on just this last Tuesday, a couple of days ago, and it said, Chairman Powell calls talk of cutting rates premature. Federal Chairman Powell pushed back on Friday against market expectations for aggressive interest rate cuts. And his quote, which I couldn't tell from the article what it was, but this was either from the recent comments or whatever in December, it doesn't matter. It said, quote, it would be premature to conclude with confidence that we have achieved a sufficiently restrictive stance or to speculate on when policy might ease. That's the point. Nobody really knows. But again, Wall Street Hacker says that it's not going to be that many rating decreases. Actually, my forecast is, I think there might be 1 or 2, and I question whether they could even be political, because coming into the election, maybe they'll give a decrease or 2. 1, I think it would be a mistake, because I think that then it just will kick inflation up later. But they might stimulate the economy a little bit that way, or show some sign of making the current government satisfied with their actions. But But here's the real evidence, and Wall Street Hackers likes to look at fundamentals more than market delusions. So number one, there's still over 9 million people over 9 million unfilled jobs in the United States. So yeah, it's gone from 10 to 9, but unemployment is still at near 50-year lows. It's not that far off the 50-year low, and that's a lot of unfilled jobs. So so the market, maybe reporters who are more optimistic or whatever would say, oh, look, it went from 10 to 9. That's a huge amount of people who need to fill those jobs, and they aren't available. Number two, services inflation, which is a big thing for the Fed, actually increased in November. It wasn't a big increase, but it went to 5.17%. That is far from the 2% target of the Fed, and it went in the wrong direction. Number three, home prices. So in the Case-Shiller 20-city house price index, prices rose 0.6% in October. That's a 7.2% annualized rate. In the Federal Home Finance Agency report, housing prices rose 0.3% in October, up 6.3% year over year. Not quite as bad, but either way, you're talking about pretty big increases. Now, rents lag housing prices by, I believe it's 6 to 9 months. So if housing prices are going up, rents are going up, where is the progress? And here's the biggest thing of all, the thing that I really wonder about, the supposed progress. So the fall had very big decreases in energy prices. And that's a very cyclical business to begin with. It's short-term and long-term, but in the short term, energy went down. So what happens? Of course, inflation moderated. First of all, because energy prices are down, and then maybe it's not creating as much pressure on other prices, but you cannot count on that effect going forward. You can't count on effect in 24, and you can't count on that effect long-term to control inflation. That is not a reliable way to say we've got it all under control. So I'm going to pull up. I think energy is probably going higher, and in the last few days, it's been starting to go higher. Oil was pretty low this going into the new year. So here's some comments from, and this is the quotes of the week, from Natasha Kaneva, who is the head of global commodity strategies at JP Morgan. This is from a Barron's article from Sunday. And there's various quotes that I'm pulling out of the article. So it says prices could rebound in 24 as demand rises again, and the organization of OPEC, holds back supply. She says, currently we're sitting at record oil demand levels. That's important right there. Demand is really high worldwide. It keeps climbing. I believe it's 105 million a day now worldwide. I remember when it was just 95 not that long ago. We're in 100. So she said, currently we're sitting at record high oil demand levels, and OPEC is still carrying over 4 million barrels per day of spare capacity. With a significant amount of its cuts already extended, it is becoming more and more difficult to make an argument why their production has to continue to be cut when demand is that high. She's predicting oil to run from $70 to $90 a barrel, and her forecast is $83, which is a good amount higher than it is now, but it could go much higher. But it's not going lower, very likely, and that was what temporarily lowered inflation. Also, she made a really interesting comment because, I'm always very bullish on oil and the MLPs especially, but oil in general, because the market sort of prices these things as, it's going away, the industry's going away, and it's not. So, but this was a very interesting comment she made. She said, the question was, when will total global oil demand peak? She says, there is no peak in sight. We only modeled through 2030, so maybe it will peak in 2031. They say if gasoline use will be declining, why will it keep increasing oil demand? Is it petrochemicals? She said, yes, and not just plastics. It is the invisible demand. a lot of people don't realize how widespread the use of oil and gas is. Nylon, lycra, all of that is petrochemical. And what she missed, and I was surprised by that, is, and what I pointed out for ages is, it's not just that. It's demand from developing countries. People who formerly could not heat their homes, who could not drive cars, who could not even cook with fuel, are getting access to that due to globalization. So there is huge demand through 2040 and 2050 for oil, for natural gas, and this industry isn't going away. And is inflation going away? I don't know, but are we having 6 rate cuts? I don't think there's a chance, and maybe 1 or 2, but the inflation fight could take years, and you never know how long things take. I remember when the war in Ukraine came out and people were saying, oh, it'll be over in a week and 2 weeks. And this is the same thing they said about World War I. And these have not taken a week or 2. And I said that then, I said World War I, they said was going to take a week or 2. And Ukraine might not take that long. And you know what? It may take years. Traditionally, it takes up to a decade to fight inflation. So this could be a long fight. And the street is not priced for that. So you have to be a little cautious with your investments. I'm guessing, and this is really a guess, a slightly up market, maybe flat against inflation next year, maybe flat down, and a very volatile potentially in the fall. But I will say this, the Wall Street Hackers investment approach is to buy businesses with good cash flows that generate income and dividends in any environment. It's really hard to find those companies in those situations, but as long as you're in the right investments, I don't think you have to worry too much, although the right macro environment makes a big impact positively. So, 5 most interesting stories of the week. Number 1, it's just always incredible what's going on out there in the world. Number 1, Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas blamed Texas Governor Abbott for the scores of migrants pouring into blue cities and states across the U.S. So it's Texas's fault. It's not the Biden administration's. And the fact is 95,000 migrants have been flown or bused out of Texas to sanctuary cities such as New York and Washington. But millions and millions of illegal immigrants are pouring over the border. Is it Texas's fault or is it the Biden administration's fault? A record millions of illegal immigrants are coming through. Terrorists are coming through. Drugs are flowing through in record numbers. About 10,000 people a day are coming over the borders, give or take. Now, Texas tried to stop the flow and protect their borders. The federal government has taken over 100 actions, separate actions, to stop Texas from controlling their border. An example of this is when Texas put up barbed wire. Federal employees cut the barbed wire. When Texas put up buoys in the Rio Grande, the federal government took action to try to stop that. So whose fault is it? Is it really Texas's fault? So basically, Mayorkas's problem is it's affecting blue states. So he has no concern about any of the other states. But if it's a blue state problem, it's this problem. Now, just to illustrate the blue state problem, this is almost funny if it wasn't so sad. Interesting story number 2. Democrat Governor Murphy is making sure no migrants stay in Jersey. That's the headline. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy has police in the Secaucus train station making sure that migrants coming through are heading straight to New York City and out of New Jersey. He has police who are ushering asylum seekers into Manhattan-bound New Jersey transit trains as soon as they get off the buses from Texas. And if you don't believe it, here's the sign. This is what they're doing. New York City, that you can see it. We don't want you in our state. You know, we're a blue state. I think they're a sanctuary state. I have to look that up, but no, go to New York City. We don't want you, but it's not a problem. It's unbelievable. Interesting story number 3. So California just passed a new law in October that allows low-income students in Mexico, let me repeat that, who live in Mexico, to pay in-state tuition at certain California colleges. Students, though, have to live within 45 miles of the California-Mexico border. So it's only students who live 45 miles within the border who are Mexicans who get free tuition, or in-state tuition, I should say. Well, now California passed free healthcare for 760,000 illegal immigrants. California has a huge budget problem. It's gigantic, 58 to 68 billion, and they have a lot of problems. So this article and the next interesting story will relate to our discussion of the week, the question of the week. Where is the money coming from? It's a good question. So number 3 article. On Friday, the government, before Christmas, the government finalized large construction contract rules that require project labor agreements called PLAs. And these agreements force contractors to make project-specific deals with labor unions on work conditions, hiring, and wages. The new rules are going to change the nature of construction. They will apply to about half of the 90% of large projects that the federal government is involved with, and these projects cost already the taxpayers $13 billion a year. The Infrastructure Investments Act did not require PLAs, but the Biden administration is now encouraging them for grants in areas such as new railroad construction, service transportation, airport terminals, towers, and rural broadband. So basically requiring union deals, which gives the unions a lot of negotiating power. So the question is the same one. We're going to discuss this on the panel. Where is that money coming from? Unbelievable. Interesting story number 4. So the SEC either may or is likely, depending on who you believe, to approve the first spot Bitcoin ETF. This is total incompetence. The government should have shut down crypto a long time ago. And I'm not the only one who believes that. Charlie Munger called it crypto garbage, basically. Jamie Dimon. The government cannot allow crypto to keep growing. There were, I believe it's 27,000 new cryptos out there now. It's basically allowing private citizens to print money. It's used for money laundering. It's extremely energy inefficient, by the way. And the government's going to lose control of the money supply. I thought it would be interesting if somebody would do a survey and say, has crypto encouraged inflation? Because basically people are creating money. So it's unbelievable that the SEC would even consider that. There's so much incompetence right now in the government. It's worrisome. Finally, unfortunately, it's all political this week. I try to go with non-political stories sometimes, but you can't resist this. This is a well-known story, but there's a lot more details. So a lot of people might know Maine Secretary of State disqualified former President Trump from the 24 ballot. The Colorado Supreme Court ruled earlier this month that Trump is ineligible for the ballot. Leftist Democrats in 17 states, I believe that's how I counted, are trying to remove Trump from the ballot, arguing that President Trump is, quote, a threat to democracy. Really? A threat to democracy? They're removing him from the ballots. So it's not just Trump. Democrats are moving to bar members of the GOP from a number of ballots nationwide. In Pennsylvania, they're trying to bar Republican Representative Scott Perry from the ballot. They're saying he questioned the election of President Biden. New Jersey Representative Bill Pascrell sought to bar 126 members of Congress under the theory that they challenged the election before January 6th. And there was another member put in the same type of thing to bar many Congress people from even acting as Congress people because they questioned the election. You know what? There's been questions of the election in history. Bush v. Gore isn't that long ago. And there's been many times Nixon almost questioned the election in Illinois. And there's questions whether Illinois was rigged or not, but when he lost to Kennedy, but he decided not to. But there has been many times when there have been questions. So just questioning makes you an insurrectionist, and therefore we can throw you off the ballot, and that it supports democracy. This is really dangerous because this is what fascist countries do and dictators do. They use the political system, parts of the political system other than the elective system, to bar their opponents. Example, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, in Russia, where Putin has now locked up his main opponent, I think it said Navalny, for 30 years and is bringing more charges now. This is a real danger to the democracy. And if you don't believe that, think about this. What precedent is it setting? Republicans now could theoretically say, well, Biden's an insurrectionist because he's allowing people over the border, or any election in the future. Are we going to have our courts decide, or the people? So it's crazy. Anyway, we better hurry. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back to talk about the dividend pick of the week and the discussion of the week. See you soon.
Hi, I'm Nathan Osmond, singer, songwriter, motivational speaker, and even mortgage loan officer. I've known Dr. Bill Danko for over 20 years, and we've shared the stage at many great financial conferences the world over. Just recently, Dr. Bill Danko did a great Zoom call for my sales associates and shared some great principles from his New York Times longest best-selling list, The Millionaire Next Door, but also what it means to be richer than a millionaire. This is his new book, and I highly recommend it. The entire team at the Elite Team was very appreciative of Dr. Bill Danko's time and his insights, as he's a speaker that speaks with conviction from the heart. In fact, we ordered over 100 different copies of this book to give to our clients and our associates, because we truly believe that by studying this book, it can really help you to get through these turbulent times. This book is solid with research and survey research and empirical evidence that helps you to understand that yes, money is important, but money plus happiness is even better. I highly recommend that you go get a copy of this book today. You won't regret it.
Interesting book, maybe. I'll have to look at it. So what to do? First of all, as we always say, own energy. Energy is a unique investment right now, I believe, and our Wall Street Hackers allocation now is over 30% because energy has performed with tech the best. As a matter of fact, a recent survey showed energy equally performing with tech. Plus, you can get big dividends in the right things. I especially like pipelines and like MPLX, which has been our largest allocation for a long time. It's done very well. Own dividend stocks. Any stocks allocation you have should be in dividend stocks. Our favorite chart, 50 years of history, showed that dividend stocks outperformed the S&P 500 over that period by double, and dividend growth stocks and initiators by triple. So you want to have dividend stocks in general. And finally, be very defensive. I'm watching the volatility right now and seeing, but it could be it started out as a rough year. We'll see where it goes, but it could be a very rough year. But I have noticed the dividend stocks holding up much better than some of the others now. So we'll see. So dividend pick of the week. First disclosures, entertainment only, only our opinions, no guarantees, and consult your financial advisor. So I said I would do this. So for the next couple of weeks, at least 3 weeks, I'm going to go into funds. And I don't do a lot of funds usually. I'd rather pick my own stocks. I look in the funds and see what I like in them. But in this case, there's some decent looking funds out there and not many. Most ETFs I stay away from because of the leverage, and a lot of them show very negative distribution histories over time. But this one is GRX, which is the Gabelli Healthcare and Wellness ETF. I only have a 0.25% allocation right now because I just put small allocations into some of these funds, but I like it. And there's a lot of things I like about it. One, it's healthcare and consumer staples. So you're talking about some of the safest industries. 2, 6.3% yield. 3, it's got a current discount to net asset value of about 19%. So that's a really healthy discount for a dividend-oriented, hopefully safe, and I believe safe mutual fund. And finally, it does have leverage of 24%. So it is subject to the market and it has leverage, so it could be more subject. But I figured the 19% is leverage that discount, and the 19% will offset any losses probably due to leverage. And I think it's a pretty solid investment. It has a very nice dividend history, a lot of dividend increases since its inception in 2007. So little pieces in the next few weeks I'm going to cover rather than individual stocks. It's a way to dip into the dividend sector without, with diversification. And that's what it's about too. I figure I just don't want bonds. I love bonds at 5. Now they're at 4. But, for diversification for various reasons, I think some of the dividend mutual funds look decent right now. So, panel discussion of the week. As always, we're a little pressed for time. Get so much in 1.5 hour show, or 35 minutes. So the question is, California and Washington spend and spend. Where do they think the money's coming from? Just a quick couple of background points. Margaret Thatcher once said, quote, "The problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money." The California debts are rapidly rising. I think they've over doubled their forecast on debts. It's now 58 to 68 billion, which is a very serious deficit. And it just passed laws like allowing some Mexicans to get in-state tuition and illegal immigrants to get health care. Where's the money coming from? In terms of the U.S. and the world, as a matter of fact, governments, there are also very rapidly rising budget deficits. The on-the-books deficit I wrote yesterday was 33 trillion. And then I saw yesterday afternoon, now it's 34 trillion. A trillion here or there. What's the difference? Those are big numbers. But so now it's 34 trillion, but the real deficit is probably 125 trillion. And that is phenomenally, unbelievably high number in terms of even how much money is out there, how many stocks values are out there. It's incredibly high. But that difference is unfunded liabilities for Medicare and Social Security. That money was supposed to be put away, but it's all spent. So this is going to come due. The Biden administration keeps adding to deficits and debts, promising tuition forgiveness, promising this and that. Just the deficits have skyrocketed. There is a theory out there called modern monetary theory that says, don't worry, because governments that are fiat currencies like the US dollar can create as much money as it needs because it has a monopoly on issuing its own currency. But there are many, including myself, who say modern monetary theory is deeply flawed. So here's the bottom line, and then we'll get into discussion. The US and pretty much every other country in the world have massive liabilities on the books. And they have multiple massive liabilities off the books, because in the US, it's for health, Medicare, and other countries have promised free health care for aging demographics, and they haven't put in the money. And they also haven't fully funded their pension liabilities. So the debts just keep piling up. So Nick, where is the money coming from? What's your idea?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, we see what the problem is, Peter, is that and David Walker shows it on his show. Mm-hmm. The national debt, of course, what you're describing is Social Security and Medicare their trust funds running out of money this decade, and Congress and Washington are asleep at the wheel, but they're not really. They recognize the problem, but politically they can't solve it, because what's going to happen is really pretty simple, and we've seen the harbinger of what's going to happen. The printing of money to pay down the national debt, to keep the economy floating, results in one thing called inflation. Mm-hmm. In other words, 33 trillion seems like a lot of money, but I just bought a hamburger yesterday for $4.3 billion printed U.S. money from McDonald's. And so 33 trillion becomes a much smaller number. So what we're going to see is this. They will not increase the taxes because Republicans don't want to pay taxes. They will not decrease spending because Democrats will not want to decrease spending. So what they're going to do, and what they've done, is we will print more money that creates inflation that someday the Federal Reserve is like a little joystick. They only have one motion, and that's interest rates up and down. That's it. The Federal Reserve will not be able to control it. And this economy could be in a world of hurt. And we could end up like Venezuela and Argentina someday, which is people not being able to afford to buy simple things like food, water, or even any decent shelter. So this is where we're headed to, and our politicians aren't helping us.
So you took away a lot of my points, but on some things I even slightly disagree. But what you said is a lot of, heading in the exact same way I was going to go. So first of all, governments have only three ways to pay for spending. One, tax it. Two, borrow it, which is just borrowing more, or three, print it. So it's not just that Republicans don't want to raise taxes. There's two other points. One, if you raise taxes, it generally hurts the economy. And then history shows a lot of times when you raise taxes, it lowers government revenues. When you lower taxes, it actually increases government revenues. That happened under Kennedy, and it happened under Trump. He lowered taxes and government revenues increased because you're pulling the money out of the economy and it hurts the businesses and they generate less income. But either way, the thing is there's not enough money in the world to tax it, because the amount, that 125 trillion, if you took all the privately held stocks and bonds in the US, privately held real estate, and one other thing I forgot now, sorry, but if you added all of them up, all the stocks, bonds, and privately held real estate, I think that's it. That's less than 125 trillion. So you can't tax it because it's every dollar out there, and all the money out there too, by the way, is nothing comparatively. So you can't tax it. You can't borrow it because that just encourages more debt. So I conclude the same thing. The government is going to need to print a lot of money. They're not going to solve the problem. This is coming down the pike. It's already happening. They're going to keep printing money. So what does that mean from an investment standpoint? Because that's really the theme of our show. Number one, it's going to generate stagflation. And stagflation is going to look like higher inflation than you can get on your returns. And because the economy is going to be growing slowly. That's what happened in Japan when they tried to control the economy. And here's a key point for the investment world and for the economy and everybody. The U.S. and world governments are going to be forced to get interest rates down to zero or negative because they have to deflate away the debt because it's so massive. So that's going to make it a very hard environment for investors and going to be very hard on the American economy and consumers because now inflation's running higher than growth and interest rates. And so it's going to be extremely important to pick the right investments. The other thing is, and the governments, by the way, are going to do this very simply with yield curve control. If they fail, it will be like Venezuela or Zimbabwe. But I don't think it will be because yield curve control has been used in Japan for over a decade. It was used by the United States in World War II. It's a very effective way to control interest rates. So we're running out of time. So the bottom line is people should prepare, in my mind, which is not guaranteed, but prepare for 5 to 7 years, close to zero interest rates. You want to lock in investments with very high cash flows, good income, long duration bonds. I like them right now. No guarantee on any investments, but I think that's what the world's going to look like in 5 to 7 years. I don't think it'll collapse. I think AI is going to offset things. The world will survive, but it's going to be a very tough environment for the consumer and everybody else. You can't keep printing money, and the government better wake up to this. So I'm afraid we're out of time as always. As we try to get everything in. It's so much. But thanks for watching. As Kim always says, get healthy and get wealthy, and we will be on next week. See you soon, Nick. Bye-bye, everybody.